Okay, we're live. This is another broadcast of the Tom and John Show. Sans Tom Watchke is again out consulting, so he's not with us. He will be with us on the next episode, which is with Frank Wong on June 6th. But today we're joined by Tyler Patton, who is the golf course superintendent at Sparrows Point Country Club in just outside of Baltimore. Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And last name's Bloom. You keep calling me Patton.
How do I keep doing that? I think I did it, and I think I spelled it on the thing. Who's Tyler Patton? That's one of our other students, or is that guy from Connecticut?
I'm not quite sure. There is a Dow AgriScience rep, I believe, is Tyler Patton.
No, it's not. It's a former student. I don't know why I get it in my head every single time. And I think when I promoted this on the thing, I think I called you Tyler Patton too. So it's I'll have to change that. But sorry, I know who you are. We've had you speak before at our conference. This is what happens when you throw together a show in the last 15 minutes because Dr. Horvath was supposed to be joining us today, but he had some conflict, so he had to reschedule for later in the season. And Tyler, thank you for agreeing last minute to come on and talk about kind of your career path, because I think it's an interesting story. And so we'll kind of get into that. And what we're going to talk about today is you as a superintendent at 27 years old. I know you're 29 now, but your first superintendent job, and I think that's pretty remarkable in the industry we're in right now.
Yeah, really fortunate. Just been fortunate my whole career to work for some really good mentors, and never really imagined at 27 I'd be getting a first superintendent's job, but it worked out that way.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to give a brief background. So you're from Pennsylvania. You went to Penn State. You graduated in 2009 from the four-year program with a bachelor's degree. And from there, I don't know where you interned, so I'll ask you about that in a second. But from graduation, you went to Oakmont as an AIT, which probably means you interned there prior to that. And then you went to Sunnybrook from 11 to 14 as an assistant. And then in July of 14, you took over as the superintendent at Sparrows Point. So you obviously have a pretty good list of golf courses and experience on your resume. But why don't you tell me a little bit about your career path? Because you're only 29, so it's your career path, your lifelong career path. It's not been that long. But tell me about what you've kind of done and the thought process behind that.
Yeah, so like most people, I started working on a golf course when I was 14, 15 years old, and kind of knew that was a career path that I wanted to go into. So fortunately, Penn State being about an hour and a half east of where I grew up, it was a perfect fit for me. And kind of like you said, I did a couple internships. I worked at Marion in 2006, so that was after the U.S. Amateur for Matt. Then I went to Southern Hills for the PGA Championship in 2007 with Ross Myers. And then my last internship was actually for Paul B. Latshaw at Muirfield. So I really enjoyed the tournament aspect of things. I guess at that point I really didn't have a time frame of when I thought I would be a superintendent. It's kind of hard to imagine that in 5 years that would be the case. But working with other guys who kind of came up the ranks, it seemed like it could be achievable somewhere between 28 and 30. So that's kind of what I shot for. And then obviously going on to Oakmont, they were going to be having the 2010 U.S. Women's Open. Obviously working for John and getting an opportunity to work for John, he's placed plenty of people in really good positions. So, it was something I entertained, and it was a good experience. I mean, it's a very difficult place to work, but you learn at a really high pace. There's a lot of things that you see there that you might not be able to use in your daily operation in a lot of places because you don't have the horsepower or the resources, but I learned a great deal from there. And then moving on into an assistant position at Sunnybrook Golf Club, it's a little bit more laid back, and it was a good fit for me. I guess that's the best way of saying it. It was a good fit for me. And then this kind of worked out here at Sparrows Point, where it used to be an hour and a half away from Philadelphia. It was just regional. It worked out in that aspect.
So what was the process, though? So you weren't an intern at Oakmont, but obviously Paul B. and John are friends, and there's a good connection with that whole group. So was it just through the recommendation of Paul that you ended up going to Oakmont?
Yeah, and I remember briefly at my internship there. I apologize. My chocolate lab's starting to get a little anxious. Oh, my God. He knew that I wanted to get closer to home, so he had said, I think you should consider going to Oakmont and working for John. They're having the Women's Open. It'd be a good career move for you. And it really was. I mean, it was a very good learning experience at all different levels. So that's kind of how that connection worked out.
And it doesn't seem like anybody ever leaves Oakmont until they get a position or something big tournament happens. So is that kind of after the Women's Open? Was that kind of your exit?
No, it was a different transition, I'm sure, than most people there. Quite honestly, it was. I guess you could say it was too much for me. I didn't really see myself sticking out there for a few more years, and I wanted to look for something a little bit different, a little bit low key. I mean, basically, my internship experience was at really extremely high level, championship level conditioning courses. I didn't want to get out of the industry, but I wanted to kind of try something different. So, based off of that, I moved on to Sunnybrook Golf Club. And it was funny because there still was a connection between my boss at Sunnybrook, Scott Kroll, and John. They knew each other just from the industry. So it worked out. It was a really good experience going to Sunnybrook as well.
So then the jump to superintendent at 27. So how did that come about?
Yeah, I'd interviewed for a handful of superintendent positions up and down the East Coast. And, I was a lead assistant at Sunnybrook. And there was an opportunity to stay there for a couple more years, but this was almost too good of an opportunity. When you get a chance for a superintendent's position, you got to kind of go for it. And the club here at Sparrows Point, the same architect as Sunnybrook, kind of the same situation. Sparrows Point was in, kind of looking for a different change of direction as Sunnybrook was at the time that they hired my boss, Scott. So it was kind of a lot of similar resemblances between the two clubs.
Okay. So one of the things that it doesn't fascinate me, it's just a good aspect about your career path has been all of the involvement in communication. I know that you kind of stood out to us after you graduated and when you started looking at positions. And I know we were talking about you applying for positions. And so we had you up to speak at our Golf Turf Conference, but you've done a lot of other things that from a communication standpoint improve your visibility and value as a golf course superintendent. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that and how you think that's helped you get where you are?
Yeah, so funny as it would be, actually, when I was in high school, I was a journalism reporter for a local newspaper. So I always kind of had a knack for communication, whether it was writing or reporting and all that. So I kind of tried to twist that into my career path. And I actually started a resume building and career portfolio, I guess you could say branding. I guess you could say it was my own little business, side business, as I wasn't getting superintendent jobs and needed to make some more money. So that kind of started it. And then my boss at Sunnybrook, Scott, actually had asked me to start developing a blog when blogs were kind of new to the scene in the industry. So I kind of ran with that and, monitored our weekly postings. So that was pretty interesting. Aside from that, though, getting to speak at the Penn State Turf Conference, actually getting to speak to the 2-year program. I think it was maybe your second or third year there, on the similar path of career development and all those kind of things. So I've been very fortunate to get to speak at some of the National Association meetings. And that really helped me out actually in this interview process. It was something that stood out to them.
Yeah, so tell me about your, your resume. How do you put that on there and highlight that without making it seem like your interest lies in communications and speaking engagements? Or maybe that what you highlighted. How did you put that on your resume to kind of make that stand out, but still show that you were going through the ranks of assistant or AIT to assistant?
So I basically put what you just said, speaking engagements, on my resume. So that was something that was interesting to this club. They wanted somebody who was active in the field, networking power and all those kind of things. They were looking for a fresh face and just different ideas here. So that was pretty interesting. And in terms of the business aspect of my side business, they were just intrigued in the fact that outside of doing this on a daily basis, working on a golf course, that there was an interest to help other people. And that's what they really wanted here. They wanted somebody that would come and help develop a team, not just internally within the green department, but club-wide. So for this situation, it helped out. Now, in other positions that I applied for superintendent jobs, I tried to keep that out. Knowing what I was applying for, I knew some clubs wouldn't want to see that.
Yeah, that's what I was more concerned about, is, knowing, and that's part of your education, I think, and your knowledge is knowing where to promote that and knowing where to leave it out. Because, you look at something like Oakmont, and I go there, and Zimmers is yelling at me every day if I pull my camera out. He's like, don't take any pictures and post them. And I'm just like, it seems like you'd want to promote, but there are some clubs that just want to be private. And so knowing that difference is, I think, probably important. So how do you do that, though? You're visible on social media. You're visible in areas. You obviously want to say that you've got these things. With those clubs that you were trying to remove that stuff, what did you do? You just removed it from the resume and hope that they didn't see you on the internet?
Yeah, I absolutely blocked everything. I mean, I even have a personal website that I would block so nobody could access it. It took a little bit to figure that out, how to go about it, but that's pretty much what I would do for certain interviews. And then on my business card, I would actually put my website. So when I would send my resume and portfolio, they actually got a link to my website that would allow them in there.
I muted myself because I wanted to look it up. What's your website? Is it up?
It is not up, but it's tbloomgolf.com, but it's completely off.
I don't want to pull it up. I was going to show it because I think it's an interesting thing. We tried to do websites for our students here for 2 years. We did them, and I still show them how to build a website through WordPress and some other content management systems. But I realized that us trying to build them for them, it was too early. They weren't ready for it, even as going out and graduating. It wasn't in their head. But they at least all know the importance of it. And I think that that's definitely something that helps students and potential employees stand out if they showcase themselves on the web and that kind of thing. So
yeah, it's a fine balance. I mean, even in my current position, I kind of have to watch how much information we put out there just to protect the club. And again, it's a little bit different here for our members. They never were used to this kind of communication, so they embrace it. They like it a lot. They're informed.
For Sparrows Point, or is it an internal type thing, or what do you do?
I have a Blogspot account that I use, and then I also have a Twitter handle, SPCC_greens. So we try to update with pictures more frequently with that.
Okay. So you mentioned the interview process was maybe not an unusual one, but unique for you. So at Sparrows Point, kind of walk us through what you did as a 27-year-old walking into an interview for a superintendent. What did you do that you think helps make you stand out?
I think I kind of knew. I did a lot of research on the club before I went into my first interview, so I kind of knew going in they weren't looking for an assistant from Oakmont necessarily. They weren't looking for an assistant from a Marion or a Baltusrol. They were kind of looking for somebody at a mid-range private club. So I knew that was an advantage going in, and I also knew just that being an outsider from the Baltimore region, I thought I would have a better chance than maybe some of the clubs like a Caves Valley or Baltimore Country Club, where there's a little bit more relation to. I think they kind of wanted to go outside the box a little bit. So that was one big thing, just knowing who I was and know what I was possibly going up against. I was able to come to the property do a site visit by myself. So just kind of walking the property, I got to see a lot of things that I was able to use my background to help me out.
Did you present any type of report or anything? Like, did you use that information, or did you just kind of store it in your head as you were going through the interview?
Yeah, the first interview was really kind of informal. It was more about character and, just a little bit about my background. It wasn't, specific agronomics with the actual club. It's just more informal. And then the second interview, they let me spend basically a day here. And then I had about a 5 o'clock second interview with my club president, green committee chair, general manager, and a couple other committee members from the green committee. So that was a little bit more formal, but again, because I had done the homework and had been to the property before, I kind of knew how to, communicate and what they were looking for.
So anything else that stands out in terms of, things that you did that was, maybe different? I mean, the research is important. I think that's huge. And a lot of people don't do it. I think they just go in thinking that they've got this great resume, but you really need to be a good fit for the club. But anything else that you did? I mean, was there anything special you felt like you did?
Yeah, so another thing, too, is the club was looking at doing a pretty big renovation, or we're planning on doing a pretty large-scale renovation here. So I took a lot of before and after photos from my previous positions and put that in a PowerPoint presentation for them. I gave them each a flash drive with those pictures so they could see it. I didn't spend all the time in the world during that interview on a PowerPoint presentation. I just kind of gave it to them on a flip drive that they could take home and look over. And if they had any questions, they could reach back out to me. I can tell you that I had a stack of maybe 5 or 6 recommendation letters from a variety of people actually within this region that helped me get this job too. So a lot of vendor support. So it was nice, I guess, knowing that I was from the outside, I still would have that support system coming here, because I think that was a little bit of a concern for them.
So you are 27. They say, you're the man, we got you. You sign a deal with them and go on as superintendent. And then all of a sudden you got to run a course by yourself. Well, not by yourself, with your staff, but you're in charge. So you've been there 2 years. Tell me about your first 2 years experience as a superintendent, where things surprised you and where things didn't, and how you handled that.
Yeah, I mean, I knew there was going to have to be a bit of a cultural change here, just from the organization standpoint of the department. So just, I guess you take for granted when you're working at some of these places like the Muirfields, the Oakmonts, it's like a well-oiled machine there. And then you come to a new facility and you see things that have not been in place for whatever reason. And you're trying to make that kind of transition, and it's tough. I mean, it's a grind every day to try to get people on the same page, communicate the same way, to understand the programs that you want to achieve. So that was kind of a big change for me. The hours never really changed much. I think probably I work more now as a superintendent than I did as an assistant. So I guess the political aspect of things was definitely a major change for me, coming from assistant to superintendent, and understanding, my voice rings louder than anything else. So what I have to say, what I commit to is, I'm putting my name on paper. So that was quite a bit of a different, situation than I was used to.
What about your staff? You come in and you're the new guy and you're an outsider, and there's probably people that have been there a long time, maybe some that have just gotten there. How did you go about forming that relationship with the staff, or rebuilding, or bringing in other people? What did you do there?
A little bit of everything. So yeah, we did bring in some different people after, kind of a sit through and a few months of just kind of evaluating. Everybody had an opportunity here, and that was the one thing I promised, was that swift changes weren't going to happen within the first 2 to 3 weeks. It was something that was going to take time just to assess. So yeah, we kept some people on board, and some other people chose to go in a different direction, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. So every day basically out with the staff, showing them things, being in the dirt with them, guiding them and telling them what I want, rather than standing away and just pointing fingers and saying this is what we want done. It was actually getting in there and showing people this is how we're going to do things moving forward. And that's really never changed. I mean, we're still doing that on a daily basis. And just like I said, we lost some people, but we brought in a lot of new people. But I think since I started in July 2014, we have 22 on staff. I've retained 14 of those people. So it's worked out pretty well. I think in some situations that's not the case, but.
How has it been finding people? I know that this is kind of an off topic, but I get a lot of emails and calls about not being able to find assistants and interns and people to work. How have you made out from that standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, trying to get the internship program going here is really challenging when you're competing against the Baltimore Country Club, a Caves Valley, down even the DC, the Chevy Chases, the Congressionals. It's difficult. So we're trying to get a lot of our younger high school kids and local community college kids in here, and it seems to be pretty successful that they just like working here because their hours can be pretty flexible. We do different shifts, so a lot of times I'll do a morning crew, and then we'll shift over to an afternoon crew just so I have those numbers that I need. And it works out, but it's a lot of communication and just making sure you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, knowing where people are.
Yeah. Biggest challenges? I mean, been there 2 years. What have been some of the bigger challenges?
Expectations, manage expectations. I think a lot of people thought with bringing somebody that's worked at some of these clubs that it was going to translate into immediate results, and it just doesn't work like that, especially when a place has been doing things for 15, 20 years. And I think you got to try to manage people's expectations politely and show them a little bit of what you can do, but to forecast, green speeds at 12 and 13, that's just not realistic. Specifically at our property, we're basically at sea level, and we have 27 Poanua bent greens, and only 7 of them have internal drainage. So you can imagine with a month like this where it's been extremely wet, you just can't push it. You can't push the limits too much here. So that's a challenge a lot of times, just educating people.
What's going on? You mentioned that the club was interested in doing a renovation. I assume they haven't started that process, at least officially. What's going on with that? Is that still in the works?
Yes, so actually they've started to publicize it a little bit more. They are basically selling roughly 40 acres to a development company, and it's actually a partnership. So the club is developing luxury townhomes on site overlooking the water, and from that money they're going to generate, a new clubhouse renovation. The golf course is getting rerouted. It's going to be 9 new holes, and you can imagine new irrigation system, new maintenance facility. So it's a pretty big project. The scope of it's probably not going to start until late 2017, early 2018, and then probably run into a 5 to 6, 7 year program until it's all said and done.
Oh. So you're hoping to see through that? I mean, is your goal to be there a long time? You're pretty happy, or are you, looking at this as to build and then move to another course later, or what?
The interesting thing with this job, and that's why I really liked it, was there was kind of my first 3-4 years were really kind of building the foundation and then kind of changing gears here with the development and a renovation. Instead of maintain, now it's switching gears a little bit. So I foresee myself being here for quite a bit. I like it here. It's a very down to earth club, very blue collar people. So I get along really well with everyone here. I like the staff that we have, and there's just so many different challenges on the property that, I could be here for 10 years and it'd just be getting started.
That's awesome. So as we kind of wrap it up here and kind of summarize some of the stuff, I do think it's unique in your position where you are with 27, starting as a superintendent. Thoughts to people that are getting out that are want to be in a similar career path as you. I want to be a superintendent at 27 or before I'm 30, and it's a struggle out there. What are some things that you think people can do to kind of help that process?
Yeah, you're going to have to find something unique about yourself. For me, it was, like I said, I was fortunate to have a good network of mentors that I was able to use that to my advantage, I guess, in terms of the communication and getting out to some of the national events and speaking engagements. So, finding something unique for yourself and what you do, I think is pretty important. I think knowing where you want to be, so like myself, I knew after kind of going through the grinds of working at some of these high-end level private championship level clubs that it just wasn't for me. And that there's opportunities out there for everybody. You don't have to be at an Oakmont Country Club or an Augusta. There are plenty of good opportunities and good jobs. Manage your own expectations. I think to say a 5-year plan of being a superintendent out of college is probably not realistic at this point. But, be patient. I think that was the other thing too. Even though if I didn't get this job, I knew that other opportunities were going to come down the road.
Yeah. I think that part of it, you talk about, I realized I didn't want to be at a high-end US Open club. But you work those clubs, you manage those clubs, you have that on your resume. So I think it's always easier to go towards a Sparrows Point from an Oakmont than it is to go from a Sparrows Point to an Oakmont.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that you probably did a really good job with yourself just building your resume from the courses that you worked at.
Yeah, and it's funny. Hindsight's always 20/20, but now being in the position I'm at, I think you'll gain a different perspective and a different respect for those guys and see what they have to do at such a high level every day and the demands that they have. So it makes me appreciate the position I'm in, that I'm not necessarily dealing with all the headaches that they have and the pressures that they have on a daily basis. But it's still a demanding job no matter where you're at.
Yeah, no doubt. I think being a superintendent in general is a demanding job. You still have Mother Nature. You've got, expectations, which you touched on. I think the position or the job and the industry is changing some, and I think you're at the forefront of it. Understanding something about business management and having really strong communication skills. Those are obviously things that we talk to our students about all the time. And sometimes they get it, but they're just not good at it. They haven't worked hard enough to develop those things. And not everybody can be a public speaker like you've done and write articles and do that, but they definitely help you stand out.
Yeah, and I think there's those opportunities out there. It's funny now being in the Mid-Atlantic Association for Superintendents. we're constantly looking for people to write articles, to speak at different engagements. So it's funny that those opportunities are out there. You got to kind of put yourself out there to do it. But again, it kind of depends on where you're at and the time commitments that you can give to doing those extra things, because it doesn't work out when you're committed to doing major projects and major tournaments. It just sometimes doesn't work out that way.
Yeah, I'm always surprised that young people don't take advantage of, maybe they just don't want to do it, but they don't take advantage of some of those opportunities, like writing articles and getting involved in groups like the Mid-Atlantic or, whatever your local association is. And that kind of volunteerism and leadership, I think, goes a long way on a resume and helps you learn a lot. I mean, you learn to interact with other people, you learn to be a leader. So something for them to consider. So top things that you would tell people, a bullet list. What would be the most important things that you could say to a young person who wants to become a superintendent, as quickly as possible? May not be 5 years, but you already said be patient. So we've got that one.
Yeah, you're going to have to work for a strong network. I mean, you're going to need to work for somebody that's going to put themselves out there equally for you, and, understand that you're going to have to put in the time for them to develop that trust and put their name on you for a superintendent's position. I think, again, that's something that in hindsight, looking back, you don't realize how much that requires, for somebody to put their name on your resume and say they're going to support you in this kind of job. I think that's pretty key. I think having goals, having timelines for yourself, and make sure for your own self that you're achieving those or meeting those. And if you're not, being honest with who you're working for and honest with yourself and figuring out what you can do. And so many times you go to the national conference and you sit in on talk with Bruce Williams or Bill Brown, and you hear these guys talk about reevaluating your goals year to year, and they're giving people steps of what they can do to achieve and improve, from resume building all the way to communication. So I think making that commitment to yourself is pretty important, because there's a lot of people that are doing that.
Yeah. Did you have did you define goals and have them written down, or at least solid in your head when you were going through the process?
Yeah, I think that, again, I saw how much of an importance and communication would be, and doing some of these things and going to continuing education events, I thought would be very helpful, even just from developing a bigger network and a broader network. You just never know who you're going to meet that's going to have an impact in these job interviews.
One last question. Your thoughts on social media use for people, young people?
Be careful. be careful, but, again, know who you are and know where you're at. For some places that's just not going to work out. And you're working for somebody else. You have to kind of work within their limits, but I think it's a great tool. I think we've been very fortunate to use it well here. Our members embrace it. They love it. But it's not for everybody. But yes, absolutely be careful.
It's always the one warning. Like, I don't know. I have such mixed feelings about it, because I think people are too uptight. I think that the world is changing. Like, Facebook is making us not care about some of these things anymore, and Twitter. Yeah. But you're right. You have to know the limits and expectations. And I think part of it is not necessarily the person that's using it. It's understanding how it's going to be interpreted by somebody else on the other end of it. Talks of politics or social issues. Maybe that is a club that just doesn't want to bring that kind of stuff up. And you may not be doing anything bad by talking about these things, but the club just doesn't want that to be part of the conversation. And so even something benign sometimes can kick in the butt.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I'm fortunate the club gives me this much flexibility to run a Twitter account, to run our blog. I've done YouTube videos, but they like it. And the funny thing is I get a lot of members that'll add me as a friend on Facebook, and I'm always a little nervous about that, but a lot of times it's benefited me, where I've had people send me messages on Facebook for anything concerning with the golf course. So we've kind of been out in front. That's our platform to use. Do a lot of upfront speaking with the groups before their rounds of golf, but social media is an easy tool for us to get the message out before they go out and see something and have questions.
Yeah, I think that's good. Do you have Facebook page too?
We do as a club, but I don't use it. My head pro uses it to post a lot of events. The clubhouse uses it to post events. So that's a pretty good tool for them that they use. They're not as tech savvy, I guess you could say, as I am.
Yeah, so you rely on it a little bit more meat with your blog.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's everybody's. It's funny. I've seen so many different blogs where you'll just get a picture and a sentence or two, and sometimes you read mine. It's like a storybook. But it's all relative to your membership. I mean, we have people that didn't realize what drill and fill was until maybe 4 years ago. So we're a little bit behind the times, I guess you could say. So I use it pretty proactively.
Well, whatever you're doing, obviously it's worked for you, because to graduate in 2009 and then be a superintendent, at a nice club in the Baltimore region in 2014, right? 2014.
Yep.
That's pretty. I would say that's pretty successful. You're close to home, but one of the things I always say is if you're willing to bounce around or travel or not feel like you have to be fixated in your hometown, that's going to give you more opportunities. It's going to open up a lot more doors for you. So it seems like, although you're fortunate that you're close, you're still in a different area.
Yeah, it's funny. You thinking back on what you said, or some advice, I think being open to that. So had I stayed in Philadelphia really since 2014, there's maybe been 4 really good superintendent jobs that have opened up in that area. I mean, you can stay in the rat race as long as you want, and you're always going to be competing with the same people, or you can look at other opportunities and say, well, I might be able to get my foot in the door there. So yeah, I think keeping an open mind.
Yeah, it's tough for some people to kind of grasp that, but to be successful, that's kind of what you have to do. I think in any industry, most people can't just stay in one spot. You got to go where the jobs are. So, well, anyway, I want to thank you for joining us and congratulate you on the success you've had already. And I know you'll have a lot more success with that construction experience and all of that. So, any final last words?
Yeah, Miss Penn State. Can't wait to get up to the turf conference in November. It's always something to look forward to. So, and if you're ever in town, please stop by. It's a really cool club. We have a really unique membership. 27 holes. There's a 62 slip marina, so it's a pretty unique club.
I think I've been there before. I think as a grad student I went there. When was it built? When was the club? It's an older course, right?
Yeah, so the 1950s with Manager's Retreat for Bethlehem Steel. So you can imagine that at its prime, this club was one of the top clubs in Baltimore.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember when, but I think 08 to 04. At one point in time there, I know that I had been there on the property. I don't remember it that well though. But anyway, I think it's awesome. And again, I appreciate you joining us in the last minute. I think it's a really good inspiration to young, up-and-coming turf managers to know that if you play your cards right and get in with a good network and maybe even get a little bit lucky, that the opportunities are there. It can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to end the broadcast. We'll see everybody on June 6th with Frank Wong. We're going to be talking about bees and the pollinator project. I know that it's a hot topic for him with some of the legal issues that are going around now and the neonicotinoids. So we're going to have Frank on June 6th. That'll be our next broadcast. Till then, we'll see you later. Tyler, thank you. Tyler Bloom, thank you. We'll see everybody later.